What can you tell us about some of the things that went on in those meetings?
Well, they've been really productive. We've had a lot of meetings, certainly with the Future Competition Committee. I've lost count how many we've had, and we're having them every few weeks all the way through June. So there's been a lot of work that's been put into it, and they're really productive conversations. I think there's a spirit of how do we make the tour better for fans? How do we make it better for members? How do we make it better for our partners?
56 people walked into work on Thursday morning knowing it might be their last day. 73 positions that existed on Wednesday were gone by Friday. And the CEO of the PGA Tour sent a memo to his remaining staff calling it a difficult but important step. But here is what nobody is saying clearly. These cuts did not happen because the PGA Tour is struggling. They happened because the Saudi money that was supposed to fund the tour's entire transformation never arrived. And 56 employees paid the price for a geopolitical negotiation that collapsed in a White House conference room. Once you see the full picture, the private equity pressure, the Saudi silence, what the players actually said, and what Roll-Up is building toward, everything happening inside professional golf right now lands completely differently. Subscribe right now. This is exactly what this channel is here for. On Thursday afternoon, Brian Roll-Up sent a 319-word memo to all PGA Tour staff. Front Office Sports obtained a copy. He told employees that senior leaders had already informed those being let go earlier that morning, meaning dozens of people came to work Thursday knowing it was potentially their last day before anyone else found out. He framed the cuts as reallocating resources towards strategic priorities. He announced a staff town hall for May 11th. He said the changes would help the tour move faster and make better decisions. What the memo did not explain is why this is the third round of cuts in 14 months.
Before we get into anything else, what reaction do you or the PGA Tour have from the news out there that it feels like the LIV experiment is coming to an end?
Well, it's good to be here, Trey. Thanks for having me. I'm like everybody else. I'm just reading things as they come across. I don't know what's going on. It would be premature for me to speculate. So I don't have a lot to say. I just see the same stories everybody else sees. And as I've said, we're pretty focused on what we're doing here and how we're making the PGA Tour better. So that's clearly where my focus is. I've always said that from day one when I took the job. Having said that, I don't know what the circumstances are. Once there's clarity, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but we're clearly not there yet.
This is the third round of cuts since the for-profit transition began. February 2025, content and creative roles eliminated. August 2025, voluntary retirement program introduced. By November, 30 employees had accepted and left. Thursday's 56 layoffs are the largest single reduction yet, and the hardest to explain as routine. Here is the financial reality underneath the cuts, and this is the part that most coverage is missing entirely. The PGA Tour was actually profitable in 2025. It is valued at $12.9 billion. It has $1.5 billion in SSG capital behind it. This is not an organization in financial distress.
I can tell you for sure that is not our investors. The investor group are smart and they're strategic, and they're not private equity people. They are long-term investors in sports businesses. John Henry has owned the Red Sox for decades. Arthur Blank, who I've known for 23 years, is not selling the Falcons anytime soon. Andy and Steve Cohen are going to be in the Mets for a very long time, and they're committed to it. So the expertise and the long-term vision that they bring to this has been fantastic.
So why is it cutting staff? Two numbers explain everything. The first is $1.5 billion, the amount SSG has the option, but not the obligation, to invest in PGA Tour enterprises in 2027. That second tranche is not guaranteed. It depends entirely on whether SSG believes the tour is hitting its commercial targets. When private equity money is conditional, every operational decision becomes a performance. Thursday's cuts are at least partly a signal to SSG that the business is being run with discipline. The second number is 0, which is what the Saudi Public Investment Fund has contributed to PGA Tour enterprises, despite the 2023 framework agreement that was supposed to open the door for co-investment.
Yeah, Rich, rumors have been really building on this front for the last 48 hours. And adding fuel to those rumors, just this morning, there was a bit of a back and forth and some confusion if they were even going to play the Pro-Am. We had players saying that the golf course had been closed down. We had players saying they were preparing for the Pro-Am. It turns out the Pro-Am is underway. Also adding to this fuel was various rumors that I've talked to players and vendors who haven't gotten paid by LIV Golf for the last.
Without PIF money and with SSG's second tranche not guaranteed, the tour had to absorb the gap through cost-cutting. 56 people lost their jobs on Thursday because a geopolitical negotiation between the United States and Saudi Arabia broke down.
That is not an exaggeration. That is the direct line between those two events.
We want to keep getting better. It's a competitive marketplace for sports rights. I've been very public about that. It's a $30 billion a year media rights market in the United States, which is by far the biggest market in the world. But the NFL has 12 billion of that. I think that's going to go up. And so that doesn't leave a lot for everybody else. And we just, it's incumbent on us to be really good for our fans and for our partners. So that's really what's behind it. And I think the members of the committee, which are mostly players, but also people who aren't professional golfers, have been really great and have been focused on it. The discussions have been long. They've had some tension in it, which is good, which means we're making progress. Any good process doesn't have tension in it.
Now here is the section that most coverage skipped entirely. Because while the business story is important, what the players said about these cuts tells you something real about the mood inside the locker room right now. Rory McIlroy, who has been the most visible player voice throughout the entire PGA Tour and LIV saga, was asked about the restructuring. His response was measured but revealing. But McIlroy is not the only voice that matters here, because the players who stayed on the PGA Tour through the entire LIV war, the ones who turned down the money, who believed in the institution, are now watching that institution cut staff and restructure while telling them the transformation is going to plan.
A bunch of different formats, whether it be, there's been a lot of different ways that we've played it. The nines have changed, have flipped. There's been a golf course renovation over the years, which I think is actually very, very good. Refamiliarizing myself with that today, but
we're gonna get to golf, but what do you think of your new CEO, by the way?
I like him. He's got a lot of ambition. He might ruffle a few feathers along the way, but I think the PGA Tour is going to end up in a good spot under his leadership.
Do you think some feathers need to be ruffled along the way? Do you think there's some changes that need to happen?
I think so. Golf is a very it's entrenched in its traditions and its values, and that's a good thing. I think that's something that golf can lean into, but at the same time, we have to move with the times and we have to try to bring golf into the 21st century. I mean, look at where we're doing this today, with Tomorrow Sports and TGL.
Scottie Scheffler, the world number one, the player who represents everything the PGA Tour wants to project right now, was asked what he makes of the direction Roll-Up is taking the organization.
I mean, as far as Mr. Roll-Up, I think he's a guy that just kind of gets things done. Like that was my first impression of him. Is I met him last year at one of the playoff events. We sat down and it was just getting right into it. You started asking questions and we started talking. It was like no nonsense. We got an hour. Let's make the most of this hour. And I loved it. I mean, I loved his demeanor. I thought he was a good guy. He seemed like a really hard worker, and so he seems like just kind of like a no BS guy. Just get in there, let's get to work and figure this thing out. Like you look at a situation like Brooks, that was something that Brooks had a desire to come back to the tour, and he's a guy that provides a ton of value for the tour and for our fans and sponsors, and a guy that's had a ton of success in the game of golf. And Roll-Up's like, okay, he wants to come back, let's figure out how to do this, and then gets it done in a pretty quick fashion.
And then there is the perspective from the players who have been most directly involved in the Tour versus LIV battle. Players like Zach Johnson and Adam Scott, veterans who have been on the Player Advisory Council, have spoken about whether the for-profit transition is actually serving the membership it was supposed to protect.
It's just a matter of if you're sitting still, you're going backwards when you step outside the game of golf. I don't think there's anything drastically wrong with the PGA Tour, because I would think it's the strongest professional golf tour in the world, but it can't sit still. So, I think Brian and his team are now challenged with the task of looking years into the future of how it needs to look to continue to be the strongest tour in the world. And
here is what Roll-Up is actually building. Because the layoffs are not random, they reflect a very specific vision for what the PGA Tour looks like in 3 years. The Hawaiian Swing, the Century, and the Sony Open, 2 events with decades of history, removed from the 2026 schedule entirely to reduce logistics costs. The no-cut signature events being scaled back in favor of more competitive pressure. A top tier of 21 to 26 tournaments concentrating the best players in the highest profile events. A second developmental track where players earn promotion.
Top tier of 21 to 26 tournaments concentrating the best players in the highest profile events. A second developmental track where players earn promotion. And on Monday, after the cuts, more than 30 new roles posted. Senior commercial and media positions reflecting exactly where the revenue is supposed to come from.
Fewer events, fewer staff, fewer costs, maximum concentration of elite players in maximum value broadcast windows. Everything pointed at the television rights negotiation that will define the tour's financial future for the next decade.
Number one, as we look at the calendar, there is an emphasis on playing our season from late January to early September. In terms of overall structure, inclusive of the majors, the players, and the postseason, we are looking at roughly 21 to 26 tournaments on a first track of elevated events with the best players competing for higher purses. Let me break that down. Today we have 8 signature events. We are effectively looking to at least double that number. Add the 4 majors, the Players' Championship, our postseason, and the President's Cup or Ryder Cup, and you get to the 21 to 26 event range. And to be clear, we will have a second track of PGA Tour tournaments, which will ladder up to those elevated events.
And here is the layer of this story that is almost impossible to ignore. The PGA Tour spent 3 years and hundreds of millions of dollars fighting a rival league funded by essentially unlimited Saudi money. It raised prize money by $125 million. It partnered with private equity. It restructured its entire governance model. It fought off the most serious competitive threat in its history. Now, LIV is collapsing. The Saudis are pulling back. The players who left are looking for a way home. And the PGA Tour is laying off 56 people because the money it was counting on from those same Saudis never arrived.
LIV Golf exists because the Public Investment Fund wanted to find a way into the highest levels of the professional golf business, right? That was the intention. They were essentially staging a shock and awe campaign to try to bring the PGA Tour to the bargaining table. And that's why they were able to pay players as much as they did. They had the money, but also they were willing to pay players this up front because they were trying to overwhelm the market and get this result of becoming involved with the PGA Tour, or maybe just absorbing the PGA Tour if that's how it played out. But once that strategy starts not to work out, LIV Golf is very susceptible to any shift in the PIF strategy. Obviously, the geopolitical environment has shifted quite a bit itself since LIV Golf initially came on the scene, and so this is what happens, right? This league is not sustaining itself financially. It requires that the PIF is invested in this idea of continuing to try to overwhelm the PGA Tour and pick off top players and overpay them so that finally they can get to the negotiating table with them. That hasn't worked out. Now the PIF has lost interest, has reprioritized, and LIV Golf is left in a position where I don't see how they could possibly get the same level of funding from any other source.
And then there is the question that the tour's remaining players are asking privately, and some are starting to ask publicly.
If LIV collapses, if the Saudis walk away, if Rahm and DeChambeau and Cameron Smith start looking for a way back, what does that mean for the players who stayed? The ones who turned down life-changing money because they believed in the institution. Are those players now supposed to watch the tour welcome back the people who left, potentially on favorable terms, while the staff that served the institution for years is being handed severance packages? That tension between what is commercially valuable and what is fair to the players who stayed is the human version of the same pressure producing the layoffs. The tour is making decisions based on what maximizes revenue, and that logic does not always align with what feels right to the people inside the institution. So where does the PGA Tour actually go from here? Because this story is not just about 56 jobs. It is about what professional golf looks like in 2027 and beyond. Here is what the evidence points to. The television rights negotiation is the everything. The current deals with CBS, NBC, and ESPN expire, and whatever replaces them will either validate or expose everything Rolap has built. If he can deliver a package worth $2 to $3 billion annually, which is the number being discussed, then the SSG second tranche gets triggered, the tour's valuation holds, and the painful restructuring gets retroactively justified. If the numbers disappoint, the pressure on the organization becomes severe. The LIV situation resolves one way or another by the end of 2026. Either PIF officially exits and the league winds down, or a buyer emerges and some version of LIV continues. If it winds down, the tour faces its most complicated decision: how to reintegrate players in a way that rewards the ones who stayed and does not punish them for their loyalty, while also capturing the commercial value that Rahm and DeChambeau bring to broadcast partners. And the 56 people who lost their jobs this week are being replaced, not with the same roles, but with commercial and media positions that reflect the organization Rolap is trying to build. This is not a shrinking tour. It is a tour being rebuilt around a different definition of what matters. The PGA Tour that exists in 2028 will look almost nothing like the organization that existed in 2022 when LIV launched. The calendar is different, the structure is different, the ownership is different, the staff is different. Whether it is better, whether the players who stayed feel served by what it becomes, whether the fans who watch feel like the product got stronger, whether the 56 people who cleared their desks on Thursday feel like their contribution meant something, those questions do not get answered in a 319-word memo. They get answered over the next 3 years. Subscribe if you want to follow this story at the depth it deserves. Share this with anyone tracking what professional golf is becoming, because the next 12 months will define it for a decade. See you when the next development breaks.